It's Christ the King Sunday. It's Christ the King Sunday. Yes, it is. Yay! And then when I say that, I'm sure certain images come into your head. When you think of kings and you think of royalty and you think of kingdoms, almost always those movie images and images from books pop into our heads. You know, there's gold crowns, there's always a big throne, there's always lots of jewels, there's always servants, and there's always lots of food, and then there might be some jesters and fools running around. But today we find Jesus in our Gospels on Christ the King Sunday in a very unexpected place. We find him in the court of Pilate, halfway through his trial that will lead to his crucifixion. We find Jesus being questioned by Pilate. Are you the king of the Jews? And of course, Jesus never answers that question directly. And then Jesus says to Pilate in our gospel today, "For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth." To testify to the truth. And those who know the truth will listen to my voice. And there ends our reading today. And it leaves out a really important part, because the next question that gets asked in our gospel today is one of the most important questions that we are asking ourselves almost every single day in our world now. We know Pilate's answer to Jesus' statement about the truth is, what is truth? What is truth? Pilate isn't just taking Jesus' word for himself about the truth. He's like, okay, well, what is that? It becomes a philosophical question. It becomes a question of great importance for us in our faith. And we're going to come back to why that question is so important at the end of the sermon. But for now, I want you to think about your day-to-day life. Think about the life that you just go on living, and the things you see on TV, and the things you see in the newspaper, and the things you see on your social media feed and on your computers, and ask yourself the question Pilate asked Jesus: what is truth? What is truth? Because I'm just finishing a book called Hello World about how algorithms in our world impact how we think or see the world. What comes up first on our computer might not always be the first thing in the world, but it's the first thing we see. Just by a show of hands, anybody in this room, how many of you have looked on the 6th page of a Google search in your life? Okay, I see a few hands go up all the way to the 6th page. How about the 10th page? We get to the 10th page? But you realize there's only like 9,000 pages. 15 million or 150 million of those different individual things. Yes, some of them repeat themselves, but we ask ourselves, why is it that we see what we see? We ask ourselves a question, we ask a question, and then up pops the answers. We click on the first 2 or 3 most of the time, and then we believe exactly what that is. Okay, great, that must be what everybody else thinks is the truth. You know, right now in China, they have a completely enclosed Google. Right? Maybe you've heard about this. Nothing that doesn't get through government censors shows up on search results in China. If you search for the same thing here and you search for the same thing there, you're going to see 2 very different answers. So the question becomes, what is truth? When all you see is what you're shown, isn't it true that the most powerful in the world determine what we believe is true? Of course, that's why Pilate was asking Jesus. Pilate knows what he thinks is true, and that's Caesar. Caesar is the truth. Caesar is the king. Pilate serves him. The truth is what the most powerful person in the land says it is. Or the trickiest. This book on algorithms talks about how when we go and look on Rotten Tomatoes or some website about the best movie, and we think, I want to see the best movie that's out right now. Very rarely is that going to be the best movie that you want to see. Most often, it's just a conglomeration of what other people say is the best movie, and oh yeah, maybe who paid the most money to get their search result the highest or get that extra star. Yelp works the same way, right? Everybody knows that you can pay for as many Yelp reviews as you want. That might be the worst taco that you've ever had in your life, but somehow Yelp says they got 5 stars. Who knows how that works? Well, we do. We understand that as we walk forward in our life, power and money can help influence what we think is true. We come backwards now to the story of Jesus. Jesus standing in the court of Pilate, who is about to have the only crown that he ever has put on his head that is a crown of thorns. He's about to be executed. He's about to be stripped of everything. Jesus dies on the cross. And that's the closest that he ever gets to a throne. He dies on the cross with a crown of thorns on his head. So obviously, Jesus is trying to lead us towards a certain type of kingdom, not the type of kingdom that comes with power and money and control. It's the type of kingdom that comes from service, from reaching out your hand to others to help them. Jesus gives a vision of this kingdom in Matthew 25. The king sits upon the throne. Some sit on his right hand, some sit on his left hand. He separates them as he separates a sheep from the goats. I won't go through the whole story, but it ends up like this. Those who did it to the least of these who were my family did it to me. There's no kingdom that has ever been known in this world that had a king say something like that. How you treated those who were sick, and those who were thirsty, and those who were naked, and those who were in prison. How you treated them was how you treated the king. But that's what our king tells us. Now, we want to follow Jesus. We want to believe in this truth, but we have to sometimes do this with a little bit of humility. Because oftentimes it's when we believe we know exactly what the truth is in every time and every place that we become the problem. We become the danger to others. All those really good religious people who carried out the Inquisition, right? All those holy people, they knew exactly what the truth was. Just last week, a young man from Vancouver, Washington, believed he knew exactly what the truth was. His name was John Allen Chau. And he believed that God was calling him to go to a tribal island off of India and bring Jesus to a group of tribespeople that had no contact with the outside world whatsoever. None whatsoever. But he believed he was called to go. He believed it was his job to take Jesus and take the Bible to these people. Now, never mind that these people had not been exposed to any of the types of sicknesses or illnesses that he might have brought to them, that it could have decimated their entire tribe. He was convinced and sure that he was ready to go and do this. So he went out one day, and he paddles up to where they are close to the island, and he's trying to talk to them, and they start shooting arrows at him. The first day, one of the arrows pierces the Bible that he was carrying with him. So he goes back to the boat that had carried him that far, and the next day he goes again, even more convinced of the truth that he was the one to bring Jesus to these people. The next day, he was killed. He was killed, he was dragged on shore, and he was buried on the beach on that island. He was 100% sure that he knew what the truth was. And it can get us all into a lot of trouble. So along with understanding truth, we need to understand humility. The discernment that comes from listening to God through prayer, through our community, through those who love us, to help understand what truth is. Because truth is never, for most things, one thing all the time. We were talking about the internet and talking about all these things online and social media, and yes, we're being manipulated, and who knows. That is exactly what happened with books as well. The same exact thing happened when books were starting to be printed. Everybody believed that all those stories should just be handed down from mouth, word of mouth, to the next generation, next generation. We start putting them in books. People start changing them a little bit. My goodness, our entire Bible has this experience. Did it happen this way? Did it happen that way? Was it like it said in the Gospel of Mark, or was it like it said in the Gospel of Matthew? Or maybe it was Luke. What's true? Some people like this one, some people like that one. Over and over and over again, we spin ourselves into knots. But here's what I know about believing the truth of what we are told. That more than anything else, truth in what we do depends on trust. Who we trust and who we believe will have a bigger influence on what we believe is true. If our parents tell us something, we're more than likely to believe that is true because we trust them. If our best friend tells us that something is true, we're more likely to believe them because they wouldn't lie to us. Why would they lie to us? And so on and so forth. So here is how I look at truth when it comes to believing in Jesus and to believing in the God that Jesus taught us about. God made us promises. And the greatest promise that ever was made to us was the promise of salvation through Jesus Christ. That promise is true. It has always been true, and it will continue to be true because I trust the God who did it. Jesus calls us to serve others. I believe that's true because I trust that Jesus would not lead us astray. Jesus isn't taking us in a direction that we shouldn't be going. So with humility and with trust, we start to discern what the truth is. And today, on Christ the King, I hope that we will all understand again that we don't worship and follow a king who says this is true because I'm the king. We follow a king who says this is true because I did it. I led the way. Now come and follow me. Amen.